Hello there and welcome to GitLab Design Talks on collaboration. I'm here with Holly and Pedro and really excited to have a conversation with both of them. Holly, maybe you can introduce yourself first.
Sure. Hi, I'm Holly Reynolds, Senior Product Designer here at GitLab on the Plan team. And my group specifically focuses on project management within the product.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Pedro Moreira da Silva, and I'm based in Lisbon, Portugal, and I'm a staff product designer working in the code review group of GitLab.
Super. Yeah, really excited to be speaking with both of you really talented designers. Our value of collaboration, maybe you can just kick off and tell me a little bit about what collaboration has been like since for you since joining GitLab. You've both been here at different times, so it may be interesting to see how your perception of collaboration may have shifted or whatever. So maybe we can start out with Holly, and she can tell us about collaboration, and then Pedro.
Well, Pedro, I think, has been here longer than I, so I am curious to hear his perspective on it. I've been with GitLab for about 1.5 years, and when I think of collaboration here, I think of asynchronous communication and the challenges that have come along with sort of being involved in a lot of conversations at one time online. I love the fact that with async communication, we've got this historical record of all of the conversations. So you can always look back and see what decisions were made and what research was done and what was explored and talked about. But it does sometimes create a challenge in terms of there's a lot to take in. There's just a lot to consume, and excuse me. You have this information overload risk that comes along with that as well. So that would be a bit of a challenge that I've encountered from a collaborative standpoint, but GitLab, I think, does a really good job of trying to encourage team members to really communicate about what they're working on. We share, we have the UX showcases, we have Slack channels, we of course collaborate in the issues and MRs themselves. So I think that it's become a lot easier for me, but it took a little bit of time. There was a bit of a learning curve for sure for me to adjust from some environments that were a little bit more synchronous versus asynchronous.
Yeah, what I would say, collaboration is a very interesting value because, I mean, all of them are, but in a way, I think collaboration is an overlap or has the most overlap with all of the other values of results, iteration, efficiency, and diversity and inclusivity, inclusion and belonging. And yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's just, I think, about being kind and a nice person to work with. But that is not enough because sometimes you need to know how to communicate well. I think that's one of the keys about collaboration is you have to know how to get your point across. You have to know how to listen. But also at the end of the day, we need to put everything aside and focus on what matters. And that's just moving the ball forward, regardless of who's moving the ball forward, who has given their opinion. We have that value or rule of no consensus is required. So it only takes one person to decide and move the ball forward. And we do that in a kind way, in a way that is respectful of others' time, of others' backgrounds as well, like using language and that anyone can understand and being inclusive in that way as well. So yeah, I think it's an overlap of so many different things. And at the end of the day, it's just like being a good coworker. And in our case, we collaborate also with our users and customers. So that's even more extended in that regard.
Super. So I think that's a really interesting point that you bring up, that the way you communicate is an intrinsic part of our value of collaboration. And I think that applies not only to like our process for how we approach and implement and develop and design and all that wonderful stuff that happens within our validation and build tracks, but I think we can also apply that same sort of communication-based thinking and focus on language with regards to our content as well. And I think this is why design systems are really important. So having a shared language around our process can be things like being able to reference our values in the handbook, all that sort of stuff. But having a shared language around our product entails components, having a library or breakdown of language and terminology and different things used, as well as things like objects as well. So I wonder whether you both have been working on some really interesting things recently within GitLab, adding to our design system some bigger level frameworks. So maybe you can both sort of go into these conceptual model frameworks, sort of give people an introduction as to why and what they are, and we can go from there.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to say is, yeah, I think it's about language, and at the end of the day, I think what we will realize from this conversation is that designers, like a big part of our jobs is asking questions and making sure that the whole team is on board and that we're solving the right problems. And getting the whole team on board and seeing the right problems to solve and making sure everyone is aligned is also that other part of the shared language. And designers have really great skills to create those frameworks and create those visualizations and create those artifacts that the whole team can base on and work from. And it can be like workshops where everyone is collaborating, or things that are not so ephemeral, like other documentation, like objects, for example. So I think, yeah, it's both being curious, but at the same time, creating the right environment for collaboration to happen, right? Yeah, Holly, I think you were going to say something.
I was actually just going to say for you to go ahead and kick it off, just because you have been doing kind of a deep dive into this concept of objects and how that ties into the collaboration value here at GitLab. So you did that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think so. I think we can get to that in a little bit. I think we can get to that example where we were both collaborating on something where looking in a more abstract way without looking at the UI was more productive in a more productive collaboration, because if we were simply looking at the UI, which is the simplest thing to do and the easiest thing is just to look in what we have in front of us, we miss in a lot of details, and it's difficult for us to take a step back and realize what other paths are available to us, or what are we missing from this problem or from this solution. So one example that I can share today, let me bring that up. It's from instrumentation. So we have this epic to instrument code review. So code review is a new group that was created in GitLab. It was a split from an older group, the source code group. And right now we need to define the MAU, which means monthly active users. And to define that, to know how many users are actively using our features, we're first focusing on our main object, the merge requests. And so Kai, the PM, he laid out this list of this table of actions that can affect a merge request. And so if we tracked the number of times that an MR is created, or that the title of the merge request is changed, or the description, and all of these different actions, we can have a better sense, an aggregate way of looking at all of these, the usage of merge requests, which would then give us the monthly active users for our group. And so one of the things that I realized was it's easy for us to come up with this list if we're just looking at merge requests, and we look at the sidebar and we see, oh, merge requests have labels and they have participants and notifications, and you can close them, you can open them by looking at the UI. But then I realized we were missing some things that are much easier to look at if you look at the conceptual model. So in the conceptual model of merge requests, which just looks at the object itself without any concern of UI, we already have a lot of what we needed to know what we needed to instrument, right? We have all of the attributes and then all of the actions, create, edit, delete, and so on. So for me, it was really easy to help Kai come up with the list or extend his initial list by looking at all of the actions that we've already identified. Like, for example, one of the things that was missing were approval rules, actions on the approval rules. So it was just easy as extracting all of these and adding them to the lists. So this was one example of using the conceptual model, and I made some suggestions here. And then Andre, he made a suggestion about, oh, what if we, should we track the toggling of a new mode that we've introduced, which is to review one file at a time. We call it a file by file mode. Is this something that we want to track as part of user engagement and the usage of our features? And so then I turned and their attention to the semantic layout, right? And the fact that some actions are considered transactional and others not so much, right? So an action that changes the attribute state of the object is transactional, and something that doesn't change those attributes or states is usually a purely visual action, right? So in this case, changing the mode of visualization of if you're reviewing one file at a time, or you're looking at multiple files at the same time, that is a user preference that only changes how they visualize the object and the attributes of that object. So it's something that we need to track separately, but it's not the usage of the object itself. It doesn't impact the attributes that we've seen here. So this was, I think, a nice example that touches on both things. One is the conceptual way, which is completely abstracted from visualization, and then how we lay it out on top of the main UI so that we can then look at the actions and attributes in context.
And did you do that for issues as well as MRs? I feel like you did.
Yeah, so MRs were the first object that we merged into pajamas. Yeah, I did some work with issues, and you, it was really good to have you comment on it. Yeah, but I wanted to break it up into smaller pieces, so I'm not working on those yet.
I want to take a little step back and sort of discuss the pain point between the different teams within GitLab that led to us having to think about applying objects to our design system. I know myself, when I first came to GitLab, I saw our design system. I thought Pajama is absolutely great. And then I looked at our product and I saw that there was actually a lot of inconsistency, but that inconsistency didn't arise from a lack of documentation around our components. It sort of arose from a lack of consistency into how those components were actually applied. So the analogy that I've used in the past is, if you can think of components like words in a sentence, you can string those components together and use the correct words, but whether or not you string them together in the right order gives it meaning. So it felt like our design system had these words, but it was lacking a particular grammar. And that's where I felt like there's the opportunity for the usage of objects or a conceptual model or whatever it may be. So that was the pain point from my side. Maybe you can both elaborate on that.
I'll just jump in then to that point. I agree. I agree with you also in that it's definitely not for a lack of documentation. We have a very well documented design system, so it's definitely not that. But I love your example there of the sentence and the order in which those words are applied, giving the meaning. And I think that Pedro has done that very elegantly with his object system. I'll just quickly share something that we've been working on in relation to issues in a way that we might be able to use a concept like that. So if I just share my screen, can you see my screen? Perfect, thank you.
Yes.
So we've been working on some customizable issue types concepts. We currently have the concept of an issue, And we recently have implemented incidents as an issue type. And one of the ways that I have been looking into sort of breaking down these concepts has been similar to what Pedro is doing, not quite as detailed, though I do think that what you've done will help to inform my work. But what I realized through these customizable issue types concepts is that I needed to really understand the words of the sentence in this situation. So if we're going to have an incident issue type, for example, what are the words that need to make up that sentence of an incident? What are the things that need to be in that? And how does that change the sentence from an issue that's maybe a bug or a feature or some other concept? So breaking those concepts down a little bit more and thinking about the context in which those words needs to appear really makes a big difference in that overall picture and whether or not it makes sense to the user. So it's been helpful for me again to sort of think about the if we go to atomic design, sort of the atoms and molecules and organisms level of the work and how those pieces all fit together again to build that bigger picture. And I think that again, Pedro has done that nicely. But sometimes you have to do that sort of drill in and then step back and look at the bigger picture in that context in order to understand what, whether or not it's making sense to the user. I don't know, Pedro, if you have anything that you want to add in relation to that, or if there's anything I can answer, Nick, related to this particular project.
Yeah, I think it's the more and more we explore objects and just less UI work and less UI guidelines and less specifically UI components, I think the easier it will be to collaborate with our counterparts, product management and engineering, because it will be easier for them to discuss things. I mean, it's not easy for them to discuss, like, should we use radio buttons or checkboxes or a modal, or, I mean, that should be up to us, the product designers. But when it comes to more general thinking about the problem that we're solving, the words, as Nick was saying, like there's this this metaphor very similar to what you were suggesting, Nick, about the objects, which the objects are the nouns, the actions are the verbs, and the attributes are the adjectives in the sentence, right? So when you hear users in research, when you're interviewing them and they're always referring to something, that's probably the nouns, the verbs, and the adjectives that you should also use in your UI, because that's how they're describing their experience or their needs or their problem. And so the more we get into that more meta level, micro level, I think it will be easier to have those conversations. And at the same time, I think we will be able to solve problems better as product designers, which will, in a way, render those issues that we have of inconsistency, render them irrelevant, because if we solve the problem right, it will be much easier for us to apply the right paradigms and the right components. It will be a non-issue.
Okay, can help with that problem of having all of these components that are documented in the design system. How can looking at the objects help us to kind of start to tie those together and ensure that we have a cohesive product moving forward, in your opinion, or Pedro as well?
So just to summarize, you asked, this has been a nightmare. I need to get my Bluetooth checked. How can we apply objects in this more abstract way of thinking to unify our thinking around making GitLab more of a cohesive product? I think there's a great opportunity that we have within GitLab based on our context of being so transparent, as well as working asynchronously, where there's the need for more concretely documenting this type of material. So I don't have the answer, but I feel like the right answer could definitely appear within our context. So what I'm going to say is we don't have the answers right now, but I think there is a fantastic challenge that we have ahead of us in terms of what should a design system be in the context of DevOps or design ops or whatever that may be. And how can we push forward the practice or craft of design in a way which is meaningful based on where the world is going right now, where design is becoming more remote, more teams are working asynchronously and all this sort of stuff. So I feel like this content, there's a great opportunity to enable design collaboration and the future of collaboration going forward within our discipline. So that's my thinking. It's sort of a cop-out answer, but what can you do?
Thank you for answering. I don't actually have anything else to add at this time. I know we're probably at time. So Pedro, I don't know if you have anything you would like to add.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I had one question, but I think we're almost at time. But it was, yeah, what else other than objects are we missing in for better collaboration, not only between designers but with other people? But I think it's another conversation on its own, probably. But yeah, I think this, at least what I'm focused on right now, is making this way of looking at objects more accessible to others and just allowing everyone to contribute. Because yeah, I see this as, and Nick has also done a lot of work and thinking around that, but I think it's just kind of laying the groundwork for everyone to contribute, basically. I think that's what needs to be done, because there are so many parts of GitLab that honestly I don't know about, and it's impossible for anyone right now to know everything about GitLab. So we need everyone to contribute, and hopefully, as Nick was saying, we are in a unique position to create a mark in the world about how design operates at this level, but also given that we're an open source project mainly and have contributions from everywhere, I think that's an added layer of complexity and challenge. But I think in the end, that just forces us to be more transparent and have simple language and ubiquitous terminology so that everyone can understand and contribute. So I think that's a challenge with our design system, is also making it accessible to everyone, even if you're not a designer or engineer.
Amazing. Ollie, Pedro, thank you very much, and see you later.